All right. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining us at NDE Studios Live. We're so glad that you're here with us. Yeah, I'm Lane Carr. I'm the Director of Accountability at AQuest.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shirley Vargas. I'm the Administrator for the Office of Coordinated School and District Support. And we're excited to bring you our session today titled Nebraska's Comprehensive Needs Assessment.
And we're joined by one of our partners from the Wallace Foundation, Brad Portine, and we're glad that he is here with us today as well.
So a couple of objectives for today. First, we're going to discuss some key differences between continuous improvement and school improvement. I want to discern the difference between those two concepts. We're going to dive into our comprehensive needs assessment and discuss some potential implications for that work alongside of all the other work that we're doing in our schools. And lastly, identify ways to bridge those findings from the needs assessment into action. And we'll make sure to leave plenty of time to answer any questions and for you all to engage in some of this work.
Excellent. Thanks, Shirley. And as you've probably seen, we've been trying to start all of our sessions by just grounding ourselves in the work of the Department of Education's mission and then 3 goals. So we'll give you just a moment again to familiarize yourself with those and then talk specifically about the one that we believe is really exemplified in this work around the needs assessment. So for us, the work around school improvement is really around ensuring the education system, including the work that we do at the department, is taking charge of the responsibility and specifically providing leadership that enhances school systems in the state. We believe that this needs assessment that we'll preview for you today and that was built in partnership is really getting us to that enhancement of school systems and support. As we talk about being agents of change for equity, we also want to ground ourselves in our definition of equity. So once again, we'll provide you an opportunity to familiarize yourself with this. Hopefully by this point in the day, you've seen a lot of this definition. And then we'll talk about the specific words that really pop out to us here. So for us, as we were preparing this session, this is really what was pointing out or standing out to us, this idea of meaningful access for our students and the idea of educational resources. So we know that there are very limited resources at the department and our ESU partners, and especially for our schools. So how we focus those and become smarter about it is absolutely key to ensuring that our students, and especially those that we're speaking about for equity, that they have these opportunities. And then the final piece that I wanted to point out is our school improvement core beliefs. So as we break into a discussion around school improvement, this is what we at the department have really set as our foundation and our beliefs. We'll give you another moment to read those over. So as we think about this comprehensive needs assessment tool, it's not meant to be more work or not meant to expose what additional work needs to be done. Rather, it's meant to value the work that's taking place and show schools where they need to focus specific time, energy, and attention. And so again, we value the work that's taking place in the schools, and we hope that this is a tool that really can be useful in focusing the work around school improvement. I'm going to turn it over to Shirley to talk a little bit about what do we mean when we say school improvement.
Thanks, Lane. So something that we continuously grapple with here in the agency and also across our state is just the distinct difference when we're talking about continuous improvement and school improvement, and how the definition on the left on your screen, you're seeing continuous improvement, is really focusing around something that doesn't have a fixed or predetermined endpoint, and it's really about work that's happening over extended periods of time. And in fact, it really encompasses the general belief that improvement is something that starts and stops, but it's organizational and continues to go on through continued learning, professional development, reflection, and growth. And the difference here with school improvement, and we've pulled this right out of our some of our work with our partners out the Center on School Turnaround, which is out of West Ed. And they really focus on school improvement around being dramatic and comprehensive interventions that are in schools that have been identified as low-performing schools. And it's really specific about turnaround leadership, school shifting of the culture of the school, instructional transformation, things that are happening in the classroom, and then talent development. How are we supporting and sustaining our educators in our schools? So I wanted to make this distinct difference in that continuous improvement is ongoing. School improvement is for a specific amount of time and is really to target something that's been identified through some type of diagnostic or needs assessment. And Lane's going to provide us a quick example to like a real life situation.
Yeah, so Shirley and I were trying to think of a real life example to help illustrate this difference. And we don't mean this to trivialize the plague of high blood pressure, especially in education.
That's right.
It's a real thing. But I'm a visual learner and wanted to think through a little example. So let's say that you wake up and you have a headache and it just keeps recurring and it's not going away. So you decide to go to the doctor. The doctor tells you that you have high blood pressure. So while that doctor may be telling you that you need to change some things about your lifestyle or even perhaps take a medication for that high blood pressure, it doesn't mean that you stop eating healthy, brushing your teeth, or exercising. You continuously do those things. So we're not asking, your doctor isn't saying stop doing all those things and only focus on high blood pressure. Instead, they're saying in addition to or instead of perhaps doing those things, let's add this piece in. So for us, that is kind of analogous to continuous in-school improvement. A headache may be a symptom or a signal for improvement. So an example of that could be a test score. The doctor in this case we're saying or suggesting could be the needs assessment and some kind of root cause analysis. High blood pressure is the diagnosis or the identification for the areas of focus. And that's the area that school improvement really keys in on. But this continuous improvement, this idea of continually doing the things that you've already been doing and maybe just refining those is a piece that we're trying to think through. So I hope that was a little bit helpful in thinking about that example. So as we think about who should be using or accessing the comprehensive needs assessment, we really think that it's about the schools that need improvement. So we have basically two things happening on this screen right now. We have classification in the middle with that excellent, great, good, and needs improvement. Then we have designation, or the schools that and the levels of support that we are offering for schools that need that improvement. So we have our comprehensive support and improvement schools, we have our priority schools, and then starting this fall, we'll have targeted support and improvement. And not forgetting either about those needs improvement schools. So while all schools can benefit from the use of a comprehensive needs assessment tool, our suggestion is that when we focus on that school improvement, we're really targeting these schools on comprehensive support and improvement, priority schools, targeted support and improvement schools, and then our larger chunk of schools in that needs improvement classification.
And this is important because when we're thinking about a continuum of supports, needs improvement schools, priority, CSI, TSI, all those things live along a continuum. So like Lane mentioned, our comprehensive needs assessment can in fact be useful for all of our schools. But the reality is also that we want to make sure that we're tailoring our supports, customizing those supports, and prioritizing the areas of focus at each school so that we're using all of the resources appropriately as well as like smart, right? So everyone continues to say we want to work hard, want to work smarter, not harder, and really thinking about the data that comes from that needs assessment allows not only for the NDE, but our ESUs, district support, partner support to really think about how we can more focused support the schools that have been identified and the information gathered through that needs assessment. Additionally, we have a bit.ly here for you to access this document, A School's Guide to the AQuest System of Supports, and really thinking about how we started with Champions for Equity, we started with like our core beliefs, and now we're thinking about, well, what does this look like in real life? Right, so after we're implementing this needs assessment, we have all this data, really thinking through how can we focus on not only student group performance, but capitalize and optimize the partnerships that we have in place and could potentially have in place once we identify our areas of focus through that needs assessment.
So let's dive into this needs assessment tool. And the first thing we wanted to do is provide you a little context on its development. So it was actually developed in response to the need for a comprehensive needs assessment for our comprehensive support and improvement schools. So this last year, we identified 27 schools that are eligible for comprehensive support and improvement. And one of their requirements was that they must do a comprehensive needs assessment and use that and then to build a plan. We built this needs assessment in partnership with our regional education laboratory and Magnolia Consulting and our ESUs. And it was after significant user feedback that we feel like we have a draft ready to show you today. It was almost a year-long effort that we went through to think through how our tenants can be at the center of this needs assessment. And since it is comprehensive, we really wanted to think of a way that we could focus schools on the areas that they need to most focus on. So we actually added a screener tool, and we'll show you this in a little bit, that helps a school kind of pinpoint where they need to focus. And then the last piece that I think is really cool, I'm also just like nerdy about Excel sheets. So our partners at REL created this really cool dynamic spreadsheet that allows us to see and allows our schools to see graphically where they need to focus. And again, we'll show that to you in a minute. But I think before we even get to that, let's talk about the why. So a needs assessment is really about the why we ended up with the outputs and how that occurred, right? It illuminates and narrows the areas that we need to focus and helps us to connect the points between inputs and outcomes. So we're thinking about this feedback arrow at the bottom being really that needs assessment that we're talking about right here. And that feedback could go into the process. It could also go into the input. But ultimately, it's asking the question, why are we getting the outputs that we are?
I love it. And to continue that thread, some considerations you want to keep in mind when we're using the needs assessment is that the needs assessment is diagnosing where a school is at a moment in time. So if we were to do this right now, it's where we are right now, July 31st, 2019, and really thinking about it to not be used continuously because it's really designed to be a school improvement tool, right? We're not going to use it as a benchmark necessarily. You could if you like. I would urge us against that. Because like Lane mentioned, we really want to understand and pinpoint areas of focus so that we can be more intentional about whatever interventions we're putting in place to address whatever area has been identified. And then the last point is that it should really be paired with other data, really thinking about what additional data are you bringing to the table and who else are you bringing to the table to think about completing this comprehensive needs assessment. So it isn't just one person, in a room completing the document, but really thinking about the conversations that are also to be had that will deeply affect how you not only complete the tool, but then the results that come out as a result.
So what we're going to do is actually show you our near final draft. So this actually is not available to the public yet because we're going through some last minute tweaks. We just couldn't wait to show it to you and have you get exposed to this so that this fall when we have new classifications and designations, that it can be a useful tool. So I'm going to actually exit out of this and go ahead and pull up our needs assessment. So Shirley, jump in at any point. I'm just going to kind of walk through and show our folks here. But basically, it is a self-contained tool inside this Excel sheet. So it provides a little bit of information about the tenets of AQuest, the purpose of a comprehensive needs assessment, which we've talked about, and then about how schools can use this. So when our CSI schools, our comprehensive support and improvement schools, used this the last time, we saw a variety of different ways that this was used. Many sat down as an instructional team and actually went through it together. Several sat down as a leadership team and went through it. And then there were others who felt that it was just the principal, and that is could be a way that it is rolled out as well. We like the idea of having a broader spectrum of people involved in the completion of it. So again, just kind of an overall overview of what this is, what's contained in the needs assessment. And then we'll actually go to the administration instructions. And here's where the first dynamic piece comes. So again, very user-friendly, very intuitive, but it basically asks, how are you going to do this needs assessment? You can do the whole thing if you want, or you can do a screener that will help you determine which to focus on. So I'm actually going to click on that, and I want to show you what that does. It'll kind of take a minute as it does all the behind-the-scenes magic of Excel sheets. But what you'll see is that our tabs at the bottom now have screener, okay? So this screener is basically fewer questions. It's meant to really focus and understand how a school is doing across the tenants. So you as a school team could sit down and do this screener together. You're filling it out and answering a series of questions. Go ahead, Shirley.
And I just can't underscore the extreme connectedness to the AQuest tenants and dimensions of the AQuest tenants, because what we're continuously saying is the importance of using our 6 tenants as pillars not only for continuous improvement, but also as opportunities for identifying areas for school improvement purposes. So the screener also just is really helpful to just give you a larger scale around, to a great extent or no extent, and really thinking about then in conversation with other people that you may be bringing in to fill this out. Well, where are we? This really helps to like discern even the nuance between to a great extent or maybe a slight great extent.
And when you submit this screener, it actually will then tell you how you scored. So for example, A is about positive partnerships, relationships, and student success. So that seems to be something that we're actually doing pretty well at, right? We want you to be filling out things, the specific needs assessment for anything lower than a 4. So for us, that's in transitions. We'll click that. And that is in education opportunities and access. So once you've done that, then you actually go on to step 5, which is this rubric. And so now instead of seeing all of the tenants, we've now said these are the areas we need to focus on: transitions, and we need to focus on educational opportunities and access. So already we've kind of narrowed it down.
And the other great thing is that really thinking about what is some supporting evidence you may be looking at. So in a few of our other sessions, we also talk about root cause analyses or like cause and effect, really thinking about, well, what is the data that's actually contributing to the results that we have seen or we're seeing? So, and you're seeing if you're going from left to right, there's a list of supporting evidence, So we've kind of like helped schools out and really thinking about this could be potential pieces of evidence, but you may have other pieces of evidence you may want to include, and we provide you that option there. This is also really important because when we finally get down to the granularity around, well, what area are we really going to focus on? What are we actually going to place our big bets on this year? That those pieces of evidence can help to set a baseline, can help to set targets, can also be points where you may want to consider revising or making adjustments. So you want to make sure you try to use this as a comprehensive tool as possible so that it becomes a place that helps to also just gather all the information that you're going to need to move forward.
That's right. Yeah, and so you'll see here as you rate each dimension, right, we have kind of an area of focus and then a rating, an opportunity for you to think through and as Shirley was saying, list that supporting evidence. It also wouldn't be a bad idea for you to think about like a folder where you could physically put that evidence, because as we talk about the EVA and the review of EVA evidence, that can be really helpful here too. Not to conflate processes, but just to try to draw some parallels.
That's right.
So you'll see the different questions, the different dimensions here through educational opportunities, through transitions. And then what that really shows you as you go finally to the results page is really where you need to focus. So we have transitions and we have educational opportunities and access, right? And actually we can go back. This is, again, such a dynamic thing. And then this one is already pre-recorded for you so that, or pre-filled out so that we can share with you some of what it looks like. So I actually went back. I added that we're going to do the whole needs assessment just so that you can see this results page a little bit more dynamically. So here's an example. Our team filled out the entire needs assessment. We thought about evidence. And what we see is that C, this educational opportunities and access, is our lowest score. And that's something that we need to focus on. So we can then think about as a team, okay, let's scroll down to that that educational opportunities and access, and let's think about what that specifically looks like for our school. And how can we really put, again, the biggest bang for the buck and place our emphasis on that. So then this kind of gives you a breakdown. And then at the end of the day, or at the end of this tool, we also provide some really important terms and clarity on terms. We are learning quickly, and we've I guess, kind of always known that the clearer we can be with these rubrics, the better. So those terms are also defined inside the tool as well. So for example, we say systematically, what do we mean by that? We mean it's well-established process or plan. Anyway, yeah, we have a couple of chat questions.
I know, I was trying to pull it up on
I have a
mine.
couple of them. So that's our tool in a nutshell. We busted through it really quickly. And again, when we make this available, we would invite your feedback. We want it to be an iterative tool, but really this was kind of a collaborative process that we wanted to go through. That's right.
And then you get all this data and you're like, well, now what? Because I have all this other data I'm trying to get in line with and trying to figure out all these moving pieces. And what we were really thinking about, well, how can we support our schools and anyone else who's using this tool connect not only the findings from this needs assessment, but also all the other plans and pieces that may already be in place in the school. So we just created this document on which you can actually click on, and you can make a copy of it, use it as you wish. But it's this whole piece around like, well, now what? So do you mind clicking that for me? Thank you. And what we wanted to share with you here is just, well, what does this, what are some of the questions you could be asking yourself once you have all this data? So like we mentioned before with the example around going to the doctor and realizing that you may be dealing with some high blood pressure issues, but you're also living and breathing and you're still wanting to maintain your health. So we want you to then review your current continuous improvement plan. What is or are your current goals? And then engage in these really like collaborative inquiry conversations with your team around, well, what does this mean? How are the results from the needs assessment confirming or maybe potentially going against some of the initial plans you had in place? Is there misalignment between those pieces? What are some of the data that could be supporting your findings? Root cause analyses are critical because all too often we jump to a solution because we see the problem, we want to fix it. Right? But then we spend so much time on a solution that's really not garnering any of the type of impact that we wanted. So what's really causing that? And I think that that's a really great next step there when thinking about you have all this data, so now what? And then asking yourselves the questions, what are the supports that are going to be necessary to actually carry out whatever strategies you want to put in place for the areas identified? And then asking yourselves the critical questions around what should you continue doing, stop doing, or start doing. And then ultimately go back to your continuous improvement plan and think about how all these things are then now jiving together. So,
and if you want more information about this, be sure to tune in to Shirley's last session of the day, Kaleidoscope Thinking, where she really digs into this process a little bit deeper.
A little bit. A little bit.
Awesome. So we did have a couple of questions that were submitted to us. So thank you, Jen, for your question about can any school use this? Absolutely. So while we do think that this, and it is like it's a requirement too for our comprehensive support and improvement schools and eventually our targeted support and improvement schools, while we see it as a necessity for them, we also think this could be a helpful tool for all schools in really pinpointing some areas and also just as like a thought exercise, right? We think it could be helpful in that. So yes, it could be used with the cautions that Shirley shared around that it's a moment in time, that it's really meant to be a focused school improvement tool, and that it has to be paired with other data. Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions? Feel free to submit those in the chat box now, and we'll be watching for those.
I think I hear.
Okay, it does look like we got a question or a comment. Yeah.
About 15 minutes. Good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
of course.
Brad.
People in our live studio audience with a question.
So I'm also wondering about, you talked about principals using it, leadership teams, school staff. What role might community play in doing this needs assessment?
The community? Yeah. So I think that there's a huge role for our community partners, whether that be nonprofit partners, partners that are working with after school programs, families. I think this could be a really interesting exercise to do with families and community partners, especially as we look at the questions around family positive partnerships, right? So school culture, behavior, instruction time. I think all of those pieces in this positive partnerships, relationships, and success aspect could really be elevated or brought to the forefront there, I think.
I also think, so when I heard communities, I automatically thought of literally families, extended families, and then potential community partners. And sometimes we wonder, well, why aren't people more engaged in our school? Or what is it about our school that people are not latching on to? And I think this helps to create a common language around what are some expectations. So allowing people to come to the table and share some of the things hey, these are things that our school's really thinking about. We should really have a whole group conversation. And also, it's possible a lot of our schools already include our families and communities in it. And I'd love to know more about how that happens and what are some of their success stories and how we can maybe share those a little bit more broadly.
Yeah. And we've been hearing great stories from the field about how schools are really centering their continuous improvement planning around the 6 tenets of AQuest. So we're excited to see then how that can be ramped up really with this idea of school improvement and using this tool as a launching point into some of those more focused and intense.
Sure.
Thanks for your question, Brad. We have a couple of questions here around where we can access this presentation. So all of our materials should be available right there at the ndeday.com. And then within our scheduled event, there should be something that said, that should say materials, and download the slide.
Thank you, Jeff, for posting the link. Yes. I appreciate it.
And Chris, we also see when will this be available? So it's really close. We have added a few terms for clarification, and our partners at the REL are just polishing. And that's something that I want to just make sure to say is that we're very thankful for the partnership, really the added capacity and expertise from our partners at REL and Magnolia Consulting. And so they should have it to us, I would say in the month of August, we'll have it and be able to post that on Shirley's newly created webpage soon. So stay tuned for that. So Jeff asked a question. Do you feel this tool defines the AQuest tenets?
That's
a great question,
That is a really
Jeff.
great question, actually.
Yeah. What do you think? No, I'm just kidding.
That's true.
No, I would actually love to have people's thoughts on this. And Jeff was one of the reviewers that provided some expert opinions and thoughts and refinement on the tool. What I'll tell you is that our AQuest tenants are actually undergoing just kind of a small facelift. So it's actually AQuest's 5-year birthday coming up, and you can also tune in and learn a little bit more at my session at AQuest at 5 coming up really soon. What I can tell you is that the state board is looking at each of these tenants, and the tenants aren't changing significantly. Okay, they're not going to be revolutionarily different. There are some wording changes and just some things that have evolved in our thinking. What we can tell you about this is that these pieces are backed by research, significant research that has been done by the REL and also from the field, right? And we're able to pull in and say, while mission, vision for learning was not included in the AQuest tenets, we know that that has to land somewhere. And for us, we placed it in positive partnerships, and it's about that relationships and for student success. So we do feel that this is a strong tool for fitting a specific purpose around school improvement, and it does reflect the 6 AQuest tenets. We were adamant from the get-go that this tool had to be centered on the 6 tenets of AQuest. Do you have anything to add, Shirley?
Yeah, and I also wonder too, to what extent the rubric almost operationalizes the impact of the statements made in the EBA survey. So yes, we may actually have a vision and mission, but to what extent is that something that's like a living and breathing thing that's communicated regularly, and also everyone in our community understands why we do what we do, which is also something slightly more difficult to quantify and package and then submit. So we know that too, but at the very least, it's having those conversations at the very building level.
And again, just to kind of discern, we see the EBA as a continuous improvement tool, and we see this as taking it a step further and really focusing as a school improvement tool.
Yeah.
And to your point, Jeff, it does build some connections that maybe we didn't bring out in the EBA in the first development of that. So great question.
And then Jeff, like Lane mentioned earlier, and everyone, not just Jeff, thanks for chatting with us, Jeff. There will be a website, and once that website is done, but also once the tool is done, we'll definitely make sure to communicate that to our ESU partners, our districts, our schools, our internal staff.
We're excited to just have people get into this tool when we have it available, and we'll be sure to make it available to our ESU partners. I think they're going to be critical partners in rolling this out to schools, especially to our needs improvement schools, which we know that there are going to be around 10% or more of our schools will be needs improvement, as that's kind of what it's been over the last few years. So how we support those schools is going to be key, and our ESU partners are huge in that process as well. So very excited to get that rolled out. Okay, we can make sure to make that, we can make that Google Doc available for you.
He just wants it in the chat box, so I'll do it real quick.
So we'll hang around here for a couple of minutes, just a few more minutes left. And so if you have any questions, otherwise, you know how to reach out to us. We're very excited to be in this work and excited for this tool to get rolled out to you all. Awesome.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it really is a powerful tool. I'm also wondering if it's designed in a way that networks of schools could do it together. You know, a couple of schools in an area or region or within a district.
Yeah.
Especially if they identify common areas of need. It might be a tool for collaboration between and among schools.
I actually think that's really fascinating and would love to think through how ESUs could use this as like a region.
Yeah.
I know that kind of work is already being done with like the simple process and thinking about service implementation and how we can be but how we can really be smart about thinking even further, right? And prompting a little bit more. So very excited about how that could, I actually hadn't thought of that, and I love the idea of a network. We also know that in ESU 15, I believe they're doing triads. So it's actually schools learning together. So like, again, triads, 3 schools learning from one another. It could be fascinating to think how that could be used.
Yeah.
Good question.
Working smarter.
That's right. That's right.
And how powerful it is, right? Because it's almost likely that schools will be encountering similar problems, but you may have been trying this one strategy for years. I've been trying this one thing, but I think together makes it stronger.
Shirley, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit and discern between a diagnostic or like a diagnostic review and a needs assessment, and when either or both may be appropriate.
So I think I would say both are appropriate. A diagnostic review, and the way in which have completed them in the past and previous work, is not just about sitting down with a group of people and completing a document with evidence that may be static because it's like literal documents or pictures or things you're seeing that are not moving. The diagnostic review also encompasses a lot of interviews, a lot of classroom walkthroughs, a lot of literally understanding how and why a school ticks the way it does. And you're noticing patterns even throughout the 1, 2, 3 days you may be on site doing something like that. And then this needs assessment could be something done that is literally assessing where you are at this one specific moment in time across a variety of multiple indicators. And you're also seeing how potentially other people are seeing it too. So there's some similarities between those. But I mean, jump in, anybody else who ever has a thought too about that. And I guess I would also say that the needs assessment helps to really drill down in a more rapid way, whereas in a diagnostic review, I'm looking at a bunch of data and I'm trying to distill how all of these things are playing into a variety of the different tenants. And again, I'm anchoring it in our AQuest tenants. I want to make sure we're using that same language. And I just, the dynamicism, that's a word, I just made it up, around the needs assessment allows for it to be visually instant around, here's an area of focus immediately around a multitude of data that we're putting in.
Yeah, I think that's helpful.
I don't know.
I was just curious.
Yeah, that's just my thinking.
You've engaged in both of those, so
Yeah,
I wondered how you saw those interfacing. So Larianne just chimed in with a question about the timeline for completion. We want this to be available and ready to roll out, and it will be for this fall. So we see when our classifications come out in October for our schools that for those needs assessment or needs improvement schools, this tool will be available. There's no expectation on our part that needs improvement schools don't need to complete a new plan or anything like that. It's just kind of an explanation of where they are using our AQuest system. And then the question has always been, well, what are you doing for us, or how are you helping us improve? This is one of those tools that we believe it could help those schools improve. So there's no timeline, but we hope that once they get that classification, they'll really get to work and get to thinking about, well, what do we need to really refine or define or change or ramp up or ramp down, whatever the case may be in our school.
I also wonder if another next step, once the tool is ready and out there to go, how we could leverage maybe, I don't know, is it the SDA group or the PDO group around thinking about how we could do just some common learning around this tool and potentially partner with ESUs around using the tool with some schools that they're already supporting really deeply. So we're also not trying to impose a tool onto every single school, being very mindful that every ESU is providing whatever tools and strategies their schools need, because it's based on each individual context. And we also want to make sure, oh, thanks, John. I don't know what I said there. But we also want to make sure that, we work together on this process. So that might be an option. I don't know, something to think about.
And I think about PDOs in September. It could be really interesting to engage in the discussion around it there. So it looks like we have about 7 minutes left. Any other questions or considerations with our needs assessment? I think one question that we would have and that we would engage at some point on, we've been doing a lot of work on targeted support and improvement and really thinking about student group performance across the AQuest indicators. So one of our questions is, do we need to refine this tool to meet the needs of those schools that will engage in this needs assessment when they are identified for targeted support and improvement, or can it be used in this current form? So that's something that we're still working on. We have a researcher, Philip White, who is doing some work on targeted support and improvement and the support aspects of that. But we're really considering, what does this look like for targeted support and improvement? So that's still to come and one of our next steps.
You can check out that presentation that happened earlier today, but the links are still live. So by all means.
The video is there. So
that's all right.
check it out.